Welcome to Rebel Speak. Today I want to take a moment and sit in Isaiah 41. And the book of Isaiah is a fascinating book. We meet God's heart, I think politically, we meet God's heart politically, God's consternation at human confidence and the weapons fashioned by humanity, our confidence that the weapons fashioned by humanity are stronger and more reliable, more to be trusted. I think throughout Israel's history, in Isaiah, I'm looking at Isaiah 41, and we're no longer a two nations. Once upon a time, it was a one nation state, then a two nation state, and now it's a one nation state that's actually been through a lot because Babylon's already put the people into exile. They've been sent far out. They're far away. Life is nothing as they've known it, as they've heard of it. And Isaiah 41 is in that section of Isaiah that's where God is no longer saying to the people, "I'm done with you." The frustrations, God's bringing the people back home. God's bringing the people back to life with God. Kind of they've been through it, and God is ready. God is bringing an end to Babylon. Babylon's been part of Scripture says Babylon's been something God's used to show the people that they can't just behave any way. They can't be idolatrous and say, "Oh no, we're attached to God." You can't do that. You can't say, "Oh yeah, I'm with God, but my life looks nothing like God. My life's not in any way shaped by who God is." That's not just mythical. Because of the realness of God, because of God's true personality, that God's not a human concept. God is person. And when God woos Abraham and Sarah, when God woos them and has a vision for a people that glorify God, it's that those people, everything about their life express God's goodness. And of course that doesn't happen. The greed and love of power, lust for power, take over. And so then God says, "Okay, I'm done, and you're being sent from this land." And now in Isaiah 41, God's actually seeing that he hears the cry of their heart. He knows, and he's always planned. That's what the book of Isaiah lets us know, that God, there's almost a humorous element of God. God is so for life that God will say, "This is going to be destroyed or brought to an end." And then the next sentence has life coming forward. The animals are giving birth to animals. It's ruination is not who God is. Life always is springing forth from God. So even when there's seasons of trial, the people where God's like, "You can't just presume on me. You can't endlessly presume on me and say that it doesn't matter when it matters so much." But now we are in chapter 41, where God's restoring. His vision of restoration is brought forward. It's brought to light. And there's another part of God in Isaiah that's very funny to me, where God is kind of laughing at what we put our trust in. Like, wow, you put your trust. I mean, God has a lot of ways of talking about and dealing with idolatry. Just the shock, or I think is it Jeremiah at one point, he's like, "What nation does that? Who does that?" Who turns in gods that are not real? Who turns in a God that's real? Who exchanges a God that's real for things that aren't real? Like, wow, okay. But here we are in Isaiah 41. "Listen in silence before me, you lands beyond the sea. Bring your strongest arguments. Come now and speak. The court is ready for your case." So God is presenting himself in a context of court case. And he's like, "Okay, I'm ready. Bring it on. Bring it on. Bring it on. I'm ready." We're having power encounters. That's the term we're having here, okay? Because God has raised up Cyrus to liberate the people. God has raised up Cyrus to liberate the people. And God wants them to know that this next act of Cyrus, this act of restoration, and we know Cyrus is how the temple gets built again. Like Cyrus is how the people get papers of safe passage to return to the land. We know that Cyrus is the one who provides a way. And God's like, this is me. This is me. So God's going to contrast God's self to idols that are human-made. And I think there's a lot of humor. There's several of these passages. They're quite fun. But here God says, who has stirred up this king from the east? That's Cyrus. Who meets victory, the king from the east, who meets victory at every step. Okay, so Cyrus is very able, very able. Persia's very powerful at this point when God says this. Who indeed but Yahweh? It just, God's owning it. This is me. I have brought you one able to liberate you. And I just want to say to any person who's in the midst of situations and circumstances that feel bigger than you, and you feel like, I can't be liberated, I cannot get free from this. The God of the universe is capable of bringing who you need and what you need to liberate you. And I encourage you to say, God, I need a liberator. I need liberation. Ask God, ask God, ask God to bring you a Cyrus. Ask God to maybe make you a Cyrus. Often in my life, God's wanted to make me a Cyrus and not bring me a Cyrus. But there's also been many times when God's brought me a Cyrus. My life has not succumbed to so much of what it could have or has temporarily succumbed to. God has saved me, found me, sought me, saved me again and again. And that's what this chapter is about. It's about the one who comes into hard and harsh circumstances where we're living lives that aren't our own. They're not, in Babylon, their lives are not their own. They have no say. And if you're in circumstances that feel genuinely trapped, ask God for a Cyrus. Ask God for means of salvation. He is the means, I get that. But in this story, the means is one named Cyrus. And I want to encourage you to ask God to bring salvation to you through the means that he feels are best. Who has stirred up this king from the east, who meets victory at every step? Who indeed but Yahweh? Yahweh gives him victory over many nations and permits him to trample their kings underfoot. These are battles, king-to-king battles, and Cyrus keeps winning. He puts entire armies to the sword. He gets rid of them. He gets rid of the things. He gets rid of these things through strength. He scatters them in the wind with his bow. He chases them away and goes on safely. It's an image like the undaunted. You know, he's been through it and then he's still looking good. He goes on safely, though he is walking over unfamiliar ground. This really speaks to me today as well. That Cyrus, it's not Cyrus's knowledge, it's Yahweh on Cyrus's side that has him moving safely, walking on unfamiliar ground. So he's at disadvantage. He's warring at disadvantage. He's warring on land that's not his own. And he is winning because Yahweh is claiming it. The Lord's saying, because of me, Cyrus is having victory on unfamiliar ground. And I want to speak about that, having victory on unfamiliar ground. It's one thing to have victory in familiar ground. It's another thing to take victory in places that are unfamiliar. But God empowers us. He's with us. He's with us. Who has done such mighty deeds, directing the affairs of the human race as each new generation marches by? Here's that history. Here's that confidence of the God through history, the God of history. History is God's canvas, okay? God loves history. It's the story of human salvation. All of history is the story of human salvation, human rebellion, human salvation. Human rebellion, God's faithfulness, God's faithfulness. I'm going to say this again. Who has done such mighty deeds, directing the affairs of the human race as each new generation marches by? You and I are a generation marching by. We're walking through it. It is I, Yahweh, the first and the last. I came before anything, and I outlive everything. I alone am He. I love, this is God, when you're around authority, it's confident stuff, right? It's confident stuff. Jesus walked in confidence. And not, like, one could say, well, that's stating the obvious. But there's something about God's heart that's so for humanity. It's not always on that page. It's not always. God's heart is so for humanity that sometimes we can feel God's loss. Sometimes when I read the Old Testament, I hear Leah's voice. I love Leah. Like, I always love when I meet families that have named a daughter Leah, because Leah, I'm pretty sure, is the reason behind Judah and salvation, her worshiping. But I sometimes we can hear that voice of wanting to be loved. There's that voice. But then here we have the voice of Yahweh, who's like, ha, who are you? I am first and last. I alone am He. God is so confident. I love that strength of character. And just to feel that, like when we're in situations where we need mercy, God's not, I don't know, He's not playing with us. I think some of us, I've met people. I was blessed to be raised with pretty good theology, pretty good storyline of who God is. And I meet people where it's so complicated, where, gosh, there's just a lot about the storyline that has them feeling like they're walking on a tightrope walk. And really, to me, the Old Testament says you're not. You're not. God is so very for you. He's so working everything to His good, which is His glory. And His glory is not in tension with your good and your glory. They're not in tension with each other. Salvation is your story. And you can say, wow, I'm failing, or I'm in circumstances that I can't get the upper hand on. Well, God can. The thing you don't want to do is cut your cords with God. Don't do that, okay? I've watched God get me through some pretty harsh seasons of rebellion, but they weren't just rebellion. They were really a lot of brokenness manifesting. And I didn't make peace, but I didn't break relationship. It's easy to break relationship with God, but don't do that. His love has a way forward for you. His love has guidance. His love has steps. His love can reach down into that miry pit and pull you out. It's God's good grace to do that. That's salvation. It finds you. And it doesn't do it on our own terms, and I get that. I get that frustration. Honestly, for me, that's self-pity. God's always made me be stronger than I wanted to be. But God has been faithful when I've kind of been like, I don't know how to get out of here. God's helped me find ways. When my heart's not wanting to get out of there, God's helped my heart shift. God's been very faithful to me, and He'll be faithful. He is faithful to you. Who has done such mighty deeds? Okay, I, the Lord, the first and last, I alone am He. God's so confident. The lands beyond the sea watch in fear. Okay, these are the lands beyond the sea. For me, when I read Old Testament, it's you're way out there. You're far from God. It's a little bit like a geographical metaphor. You're far, far away. Remote lands tremble and mobilize for war. Okay. It also, I think, is talking about Cyrus is coming, and people that aren't like, so Cyrus is moving forward, and then the people that are far from that, he is so terrifying that far away lands are scared. Like, what do we do? This gentleman's approaching and there's no way of stopping it. Okay, so that's there as well. Okay, the nations far away, the remote lands, they just hear rumors of Cyrus coming and they mobilize for war. And then here's where the kind of humor, to me, they encourage one another with the words, be strong. Okay, they're terrified and they're saying, be strong. And sometimes I hear so much of this kind of talk in the age we live in, where somehow words are going to get us to where we need to be. If I just think the right thoughts and I speak the right things. And I get redemption of our mind. I get how powerful our mind is. But our mind is powerful only when it locks in with the God of all power. The power is not in me. It's that as I renew my mind to think about God and to center, right, to orient, to rightly orient myself to who God truly is. I have joyous thoughts. I am happy. I am aware of God's goodness in the midst of the goodness of God outweighs and outperforms human misery. This is hard to believe if you're only seeing human misery. If you're not getting in touch with God's goodness and his plan of life for yourself and those you love, where all of a sudden you're not overwhelmed. That's like all the water in the ship and the ship starts sinking. When we're overwhelmed, when we're taking in more negative than sitting in the presence of God's goodness and looking at this world in all of its masterpiece beauty, we get overwhelmed. The water coming in is more than our little boat can stay afloat with. But this, to me, I just want to go back to this, where they say, be strong. They're scared to death. Be strong. The craftsmen, this is the one, they're making idols. The way they're being strong is they're taking refuge in false things that cannot provide refuge. Like, what are the things you're hiding in right now? What are the places you're like, oh, if I can just get this to work, I'm going to be okay? It's not true. They're not true, whatever they are. And so you've got this, they're saying be strong, and then they're in their urgency building. The craftsmen rush to make new idols. Oh, if we just have a few, what idol do we need today? Okay, what can we put our trust in today that's going to make it all better? It's going to make Cyrus go away. What can we do? So the carver hurries the goldsmith. Okay, so they carve a mold out of wood and then pour the gold into it. Okay, so the carver hurries the goldsmith, and the molder, the one shaping it, helps at the anvil, and that's where you have the hot iron and you're beating it into the right shape. Okay, so this is all language of crafting an idol that's going to save them. And we can say, oh, that's so far away, that's so ridiculous, but I think we put our trusts in just as silly and superfluous, beyond true things. When something's superfluous, it's not real, it's not pertinent, it's not something superfluous, I can get rid of it and it doesn't really affect my life. Okay, we put our trust, if I were just pretty enough, if I was just confident enough, if I was just talented with my mouth, speech enough, if I was just bold enough, courageous enough, angry enough, sometimes our anger we trust, if I was wealthy enough, we trust these things that at the end of the day are not reliable. So there they are. The carver hurries to the goldsmith, and then the molder helps at the anvil. And then here's what they say. This is amazing. Good, they say. It's coming along fine. Now, I want you to hear this juxtaposition. Good, it's coming along fine. Carefully, right, because they're fragile. Okay, carefully they join the parts together. Okay, humans are making human structures that have no power. Then fasten the thing in place so it won't fall over. Another common scripture would say, nail it down so it won't topple, right? Because they're using pretty primitive means to build these, and so this little metal idol could wobble and fall over like Dagon in the temple. That's a great story there too. But they're making these, however big they are, they're making these little idols that don't have strength. They don't have the ability to endure. So they nail it down, but they're calling it what? They're calling it good, right? They're saying, oh, it's coming along fine. That's going to be great. That's going to really help us persevere against Cyrus. And here's God. He's not going to contrast people that don't have Yahweh. People that turn to futile, unreliable things. But as for you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, my chosen one. There's that beautiful Israel, Jacob, my chosen one, descended from my friend Abraham. Right here, God's saying we have history. We have relationship. We have history. I have called you back from the ends of the earth. See that contrast? Ends of the earth, ends of the earth. They are from far away, afraid. And you, Israel, have been sent out far away. And you too are afraid. But I, your God, have called you back from the ends of the earth so you can serve me. And that, because I don't know, I think the word serve might sound odd, but to be in that right relationship, it's not, I don't know, I don't know. I think the word serve's a little hard, like like how do I get lost when I serve someone else? And this is not that kind of service where you're lost. This is that kind of service where you're found in that relationship and your heart flows, right? God's heart, in John it says, God's heart flows into Jesus, and there's this like flowing, everyone's flowing into each other. So I want to flow into you. I want to do things that bring you joy. And you bring me joy, and that's intimacy, right? The Gospel of John really paints a beautiful picture of this. But God's saying, no, I don't want you far away and not near me. I want you near me, and I want you in relationship, and I want you in that symbiotic, that relationship, like think of a figure eight, where we are alive in one another. For I have chosen you and will not throw you away. The people feel thrown away. That's the truth. They feel thrown away. They feel thrown away. They've been out there and spread out in exile. And he's saying to them, I've chosen you and will not throw you away. And then here's a very famous verse. Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed. Don't give up, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Sometimes we need God to strengthen us, not just to save us, but to give us the strength to get through what we're going through. God says, I will strengthen you. I will help you. See that God calls himself Yahweh. I am who I say I am, or I am. Lots of ways of seeing that, but personhood. I, God the person, will strengthen you. I, God your friend, will help you. I, God your creator, will uphold you with my victorious right hand. That right hand is the hand of strength. It's the hand of guidance. It's the hand of counsel. It's the hand of wisdom. It's the hand of confidence. I, the confident God of the universe, I see where you are. I see your need. And I want you to see what you're up against. You're up against people who've disastrously, I want to say, put their trust in the wrong thing. Disastrously, they put their trust in the wrong thing. But he's not saying you. I love this. Don't you be afraid. Okay, here's the story. I'm coming, right? I'm coming. I have chosen you. My choosing you is way bigger. My choosing you is way bigger than your circumstances right now. I will not throw you away. Sometimes we feel a little thrown away. I encourage you to say, God, come into my heart. Come and open my heart to the way you cherish me, God. Open my heart. Maybe open my anger. Maybe I'm so angry I can't receive. God, come and open my heart to receive that you, God, will not throw me away. God's not done with you. I don't care what your circumstances are. I don't care where you are. God has chosen you and will not throw you away. Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. Why? I am your God. You don't have a carved idol. You are not without a God. God's encouraging Cyrus, moving Cyrus forward on behalf of his people. God's encouraging circumstances on behalf of you. I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. God bless you.